Gabriel, pleasure having you on. It's been a long time coming. I'm really happy that you took the time to chat today. We have a lot of ground to cover, but I want to start really with, I think one area that I think that you're focused on, obviously mission is focused on, is the software developer, right? Obviously the most important role, obviously in technology. How has the role, in your estimation, evolved over the years, right? You've had a long career in tech, so how have you seen the role itself change?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's actually interesting you say that it's the most important role. Definitely, it's one of the key roles within a technology company. We always think about software engineering. I do think it's changed dramatically, though, over the last 10, 15 years. Building your product was probably one of the biggest risks that you had when you were launching a startup in the past. I would say now, as an ex-investor, one thing that we always talk about being potentially even a bigger risk is the go-to-market strategy. And so how you're going to get your product in front of customers. I think that's to some degree changed the dynamic of the importance of the engineering team within a startup. Don't get me wrong, a great product is a big part of the battle, and a lot of the products that we use and love, we love them because they're great products. But I think equally as impactful today is how you're going to get that product to market. And so I don't know if that's necessarily changed the function of the software engineer. But it just struck me when you said like one of the most or the most important role. I think that's somewhat evolved over the last years. In terms of the day to day of engineering teams, I think one of the big things is we're just really seeing a lot of great tools that are coming out that are helping engineers be more effective at their craft. So compared to 10 years ago, there wasn't a de facto standard set of tooling that engineers would use to build software. But now, if you talk to an engineer in Canada or an engineer in Australia or Argentina or Pakistan, everybody's using the same stack. And that stack is typically Jira for project management, and then GitHub or one of Bitbucket or one of the other code repository tools, and then some communication platform. So that could be Slack or Teams, etc. So you see a lot of engineers really understand how to use the same software and how to leverage that tools. And so I think that's made software development more efficient as a result.
Yeah. Maybe my view is that it's also allowed developers to just do much more, right? Because of the plethora of tools. I don't know if it's the same kind of analogy of like, humans in chess today, where it's like, man alone is going to do okay, but then man plus machine is going to do much, much better in any chess tournament. So it's kind of the same thing. Like one person alone is going to be okay, but when one person with a bunch more tools, i.e., here the software developer is going to be able to go much, much further. It still feels that there is a dearth of talent, right? Like I think the number I had heard was like 25 million software developers in the world for everything software, which is kind of crazy if you think about it in terms of scale or the leverage that software provides. Do you see, how do you see this number evolving, the demand, let's say, for tech talent?
Yeah, so I believe the software industry is only, I think it's 70 years old, is what I remember reading. So in many ways, we're really just at the beginning of this movement in terms of software development, software engineering. Uh, Software, as a lot of people say, is eating the world and is going to be core to most companies going forward, if not all companies going forward. And so the demand for software engineering is not going to slow down. It's really, everyone's talking about a recession now because of how hot things have been in the last decade. I think what we're seeing is the demand for software engineers hasn't slowed down as a result, especially when you start talking about the demand for senior software engineers. One of the things that has changed probably in the last 10 years is there's a lot more of these boot camps that exist that are churning out a lot of junior engineers. In the past, that wasn't a reality. There really was engineering students and people who figured it out on their own. And so you have a lot of these good boot camps that are creating engineers. But for most companies, they don't need junior engineers, right? Really, what they're looking for is senior engineers, intermediate engineers, because if you're trying to move quickly, it's difficult to absorb junior engineers into your organization because you have to have the right infrastructure, you have to have the right training, you have to have the right, management in place to be able to really leverage those engineers.
So I think this is a good segue, Gabriel, to talk about the idea behind Mission, right? So this need for mid-level and especially senior talent when it comes to software engineers. How did the embryo of the idea, come about?
Yeah, so the genesis of Mission really started with my two co-founders, Stéphane Rossi, who's CEO, and Fred Bunel, who's CTO. They're both, seasoned engineers, 20 years experience for both of them. Been building software for decades, and they saw something in their own network amongst their friends who were engineers, and they saw really that the engineers that were senior were starting to shift from being full-time employees to really starting to carve their own path as what we call independent engineers. So whether that's a fractional CTO or an engineer, for hire, they saw that a lot of people were moving down this path. And I think the reasons for that were, as you can imagine, for flexibility. Some of them wanted to get exposed to different industries and different types of work. Pre-COVID, just being able to work from wherever was part of the benefits of going down this path. But the reality was there's a lot of friction or a lot of other things that you need to deal with when you go down the path of being an independent engineer. One of them is finding opportunities. Engineers are maybe not always the best biz dev people, so a lot of them express frustration in finding interesting opportunities. And then when you go out on your own, what we heard often from engineers is you kind of lose the infrastructure that you would have if you were working at a large tech company. So, a lot of the engineers in our network are, ex Google, could be ex Shopify, could be an ex CTO from a startup, etc. When they worked at these companies, they had an infrastructure that was in place to support them in building the software that they were developing, and they had a community around them that existed, that supported them and just allowed them to have a peer group. We heard often from engineers that were breaking out to be on their own, they miss that community aspect, and so that was an important part of what we wanted to build at Mission.
Yeah, it's fascinating how it's one of these, like, you have to be good to be lucky, lucky to be good. Like, talk about a model that really adapted for the post-COVID world, right? So being able to provide much more freedom and flexibility, particularly for people that are going to be in high demand for decades to come, right? Like you mentioned, it's not like software is going anywhere. It's only increasing in terms of its importance, particularly for senior talent. So was the decision to then start create another startup, be part of that journey, was it an easy one? Like, how did the inception happen, and maybe give us, at the same time, a bit of the short history since you started the company?
Mhm. Yeah, so it kind of grew organically out of the consulting work that Stefan and Fred were doing at the beginning. So I initially joined as an advisor, I think maybe 4 months into the company being founded. So I was working closely with the guys and really got excited about what was being built, and so decided to jump on board full time as part of the founding team. So it really grew out of their own practice, really them going down this path of being independent engineers, of building their own practice, of carving a new path that wasn't being a CTO at a tech company, right? They had been there, they had done that, and they saw their friends going down this path, and they were excited about going down this path. I think they had the confidence and the experience to recognize that they had the ability to break out on their own, and so they really kind of decided to build this business as a way to support other engineers who wanted to choose to work this way. In terms of timing, like I couldn't agree more. Definitely, we talk about how COVID has accelerated really the acceptance of working with remote teams. A lot of people talk about COVID maybe moving the world forward related to remote work, maybe a couple of decades. I don't know, decades or more, but definitely pre-COVID. There was a reluctance for some companies to consider working with remote teams. There was always a question around, I like to see my engineers in my office, but post COVID, it never comes up as a question. I think people have recognized that if you want to work with the best talent, you need to be open to working with that talent wherever they are.
Yeah. I think particularly for, like I said, like the profession itself is one geared where you're in the zone, you're going to go through long coding sessions at random times, depending on when you're in that flow state. So it's very amenable to do it where it makes sense, particularly not in a physical office, like having to go every day in the same place. Give us maybe a sense of the traction. You guys recently won an award for growth. I believe you placed 17th or 19th amongst hundreds of startups. So congrats for that growth. Give us a sense of how you got that flywheel spinning.
Yeah, yeah. So we placed 19th. The Globe and Mail puts out this annual ranking of the fastest growing companies in Canada. So we ranked 19th based on 3-year revenue growth. And so it's pretty exciting. Definitely, as we were touching on, we were one of these businesses that were at the right place at the right time when COVID happened. As every company scrambled to figure out their digital strategy, and as companies realized that working with remote teams was a effective way to build their software, the demand really shot through the roof. And so it's interesting. Historically, we haven't had any sales and marketing motion on the demand side of our business. And so it really was all organic, word of mouth, customers telling other potential customers, members of our network. So engineers within our network telling people in their circles that Mission was a way to build their software. And then other partners that we have in the ecosystem that have been referring Mission as a great alternative for companies to build their software. So it's really word of mouth, and so we're working on reducing friction in the flywheel to really get that flywheel going. So that's on one side of the business. As we've talked about over coffee, Mission is a marketplace, and so sometimes it feels like you're building two businesses when you're building a marketplace. So that's on the demand side. On the supply side, it was similar dynamics in the sense that it was virality. So word of mouth, really good engineers tend to know other good engineers. And so what we've been focused on doing is really creating a great environment for engineers to be able to work. We feel like if we take care of that, everything will take care of itself, right? If they love the experience, they'll tell other engineers in their network, and they'll bring them in to be part of the group.
Yeah, well done on the growth, and I love, like you said, it's kind of two businesses that you're managing, and it seems like the demand's not there. It's really on the supply side. But maybe walk us through some of the challenges, like where are the pimples, the struggles that you're facing. Right? I imagine, as with any business, particularly one that's dealing with people at such a scale that you guys are, I imagine that there must be a challenge of like, okay, how do we assemble the right team for a particular project slash mission? Or how do you get people to act in a cohesive unit, maybe if they haven't worked together in the past? So curious to hear where the struggles are and maybe also how you're thinking about solving them.
Mhm. Actually, before we jump into that question, it might be interesting for your listeners and viewers to just talk a little bit about the marketplace that we're building. It's related to your previous question, but I think it's interesting for some people to learn about this new type of marketplace that's being developed. Uh, a lot of people talk about the business that we're building, or the business model that we're building, as Marketplace 3.0. And so it's like the next generation of marketplaces. If you think about the first two generations of Marketplace 1.0 really being like eBay type of marketplace, and then Marketplace 2.0 being the Ubers, Airbnbs, TaskRabbits of this world. Those businesses or business models were really about connecting supply and demand to fulfill a simple transaction. And so, whether that's a ride or whether that's getting someone to do a simple task, when people think or talk about Marketplace 3.0, it's really the next generation of marketplaces that are bringing together professionals to work on more complex problems together. And so, an example of that could be bringing professionals together to design and build a house. And so there's a marketplace that exists that really brings these professionals together and allows them to work effectively together. And so software engineering is another example of that type of marketplace. And so what's exciting about these new marketplaces is, by the nature of the work that's being done, they're networks, right? They have natural networks that exist within them, because most of these complex services that need to be delivered require multiple professionals to get something done. And because of that, there's really exciting network effects and then viral effects. And so, you were asking about growth. For us, that's what gets us excited. This type of marketplace has natural viral effect opportunities within it. And that's what we're focused on in terms of reducing friction and really getting the flywheel to go. And so, as I was saying, engineers, great engineers introducing other great engineers. And then on the demand side as well, companies introducing other companies, and we also see that same side virality. You also see cross-side virality as well, where you have engineers referring customers, and customers even sometimes bringing in engineers into the network. So it's pretty exciting when you start to see this thing grow, and the potential for it.
Yeah, and what do you think about take rate as a business model? I imagine for every project, Mission takes a percentage. So, like, what do you think is a healthy take rate? How do you see the business model evolving?
Yeah, it's a good question. So most marketplaces average between five, and I think the App Store is what? It's like some crazy.
It's like 30%. Yeah, it's pretty nuts. I think they might have changed it. I know Google reduced it to 15, but Apple famously is their egregious like 30% number.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the App Store is one of the highest take rates for a marketplace. So we're kind of in the middle of there. From our perspective, the value that we're driving in the marketplace doesn't just stop in connecting engineers with companies. Really, we believe that's half of the battle. A lot of other marketplaces and earlier generations of marketplace really focused on that connection piece. But at Mission, what we're really obsessed about is what happens after you make that connection. How can you really create a great environment so that the engineers can deliver great work? And for us, we have thousands now of engineers in our network, and so we spent a lot of time talking to the engineers through one-on-one conversations and through surveys, and we heard a couple of themes repeated over and over from multiple engineers, and it was really in terms of what their priorities were, what they were looking for in a in their work. And surprisingly, it's not, or excuse me, unsurprisingly, it's very similar to Maslow's, hierarchy of needs. And so first thing is, as you can imagine, kind of food and shelter. So that's like quality work at a fair pay is kind of like their first priority. But what's interesting is, very close after that, it becomes the quality of the work. So is the work interesting? Is it, challenging? That's a very high priority for them. And then third, right after that, is who they're working with. And so they want to work with other great engineers that are easy and fun to work with, but also that they can learn from. And so learning came up over and over again as a theme when we talk to engineers in terms of what they're looking for. And in some ways, it probably isn't surprising. I think people who are good at their craft want to get great at their craft. And so, we heard that theme over and over. And so that's what we're doubling down on. We really want to create a great environment for engineers to work within. And we believe the best way to do that is to create a great environment for them to learn from their peers and from the software that we're developing. And, this is the core of the software that we've built.
Yeah. It's funny hearing you speak about. There's so many threads we can tie in here. A little bit about your past, right? Like real founder fuel. This notion of community ends up being important, but also this going back. Another point I've told you how much I love the name. Where I imagine you want to attract missionaries and not mercenaries, right? So because mercenaries are going to be there for the quick buck, you want people that want to stick around, be part of it. But then what? How do you offer something that's more purposeful, that has more meaning? Beyond just hey, here's different projects that you're able to move upon. So I like how your answer on this notion of learning, becoming an elite level developer because of the people are surrounding you. Is that the right frame that I put forward?
Yeah, I think you're hitting it on its head. Definitely, in terms of personally, my interest in mission, the community aspect was a big part of it. As you touched on, during my time at Real Ventures, with Founder Fuel, with Notman House, with just being involved in the startup community, that aspect, or that part that was related to community was always really rewarding for me. And so when I saw that there was this opportunity at Mission to build this strong community, that got me really excited, and it's a big part of what I'm focused on at Mission with the team.
Yeah, when I come back to it, I think there's a good conversation. But I want to maybe touch upon one thing we've spoken about is the optionality that you have with Mission, right? This notion of not being able to provide a marketplace, but as you mentioned, also creating software. So what is your view on being able to offer additional products, namely around software and the size of the opportunity?
Mhm. Yeah, we've had a lot of conversations internally about the business model and the opportunity to potentially license our software separate from the marketplace model. My answer, or the answer I keep coming back to, is we believe that the software in some ways is more of a vitamin for companies. I think at the end of the day, the real painkiller and what they're looking for is access to high quality engineering capability. And so by delivering both the teams and the software, we're able to deliver on that promise of high quality engineering capability. you know, I'm not sure if some companies, it's like saying, often I refer to the analogy of sales and marketing. As you know, just getting a license to Salesforce isn't going to make your sales team perform better. You need to have you have to have the proper people, then you have to set it up properly, and then you need the proper training, and then you need to optimize using the data that you're getting from that tool. And so, same thing for engineering management tool. Just because you get an engineering management tool doesn't mean that your engineering team is going to perform better. And so, we see a really interesting opportunity to combine the two and deliver what companies are really looking for, which is this high quality engineering capability. It's more complex, and we've touched on this in the past in our conversations. Definitely, we've been challenged on that. Some investors think that it would be simpler to do one or the other, or maybe even just focus on the engineering management software, because SaaS business models are simple on the surface. They're pretty straightforward. But we believe that by combining the two and then adding the community to it is an opportunity to really create something disruptive in the software industry. So we're verticalizing the entire function of software engineering, all the way from how you source engineers, how you screen engineers, how you determine what engineers would fit best with what we call missions, and then how you support those engineers during the software development process. And so if you can figure out how to get all of that to work, it can be very powerful. but it's not easy, and it's not a short journey.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
reminds me of you had a great chat with Etienne from Vention. And so, I really enjoyed listening to that episode. And he talked about Vention being one of the most complex startups to build. And so, definitely similar dynamics, right? They have marketplace, they have software as well. It's not an easy business to start, but it's very powerful once you get it working.
yeah. It's like there's almost a direct correlation as to like competitive advantage versus how hard it is to do it, right? The harder it is, well, the bigger advantage you gain and the biggest, differential returns you can generate over time. I find what's fascinating what you're saying is just the size of the opportunity when you guys nail this. It seems like it's limitless. It's a global opportunity, maybe a little bit on the longer term vision or milestones, maybe even short term milestones if you're not thinking too far out, things that you want to accomplish.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you say that it's global. It's a global opportunity. One thing I talk sometimes with the team, kind of half jokingly, is this opportunity that we're going after is so exciting. And for me personally, when you think about impact in terms of your career and your journey as an entrepreneur, I can imagine a world one day where mission engineers are building software for robots on Mars. Like we're just getting started. Like the world is moving in this direction. If you think about all of these sci-fi movies that we've watched, Star Trek, Star Wars, etc., like all of behind the scenes for all of that is a lot of software. And so software will be an important part of the fabric of the future. And it's exciting to be working on this problem space where there's an opportunity to have such a massive impact, not just in the software industry, but through that, all of the industries that are being disrupted by technology and by software.
Yeah, yeah, I love the global vision, and obviously how you guys are well positioned, to be able to take advantage of it. Obviously, just because of, like you said, if you zoom out in the future, you're offering something that just makes sense and also gives people more agency, right? So people being able to choose, hey, I want to work 20 hours this week. I want to work from this location versus a more traditional corporate work model where come in the office or whatever. So being able to help companies really like scale their operations up or down depending on the need. So I find that fascinating. Maybe to switch gears a little bit, Gabriel. So you spoke about community, you spoke about the world, but now I want to zoom back and talk about Montreal for a second, right? So the tech community, get your thoughts as someone that was really there in the early days, is really partly responsible for helping build the ecosystem. How do you see the community today post COVID, as we're now starting to do in real life events, IRL, and we're talking about your trip in Toronto, how you're able to see people again. What would you say is the state of the tech community today, and maybe what gets you excited also for the community moving forward in the next few years?
Yeah, it's similar. I'm going to go back to a similar comment in terms of it feels like it's really just getting started. Definitely a lot of work and a lot of people were involved in getting it to where it is. And I guess I'm speaking mostly of Montreal now, but I think Canada broadly. There's definitely more maturity in the community. There's more events, there's more actors that are involved. But when you compare it or contrast it to the valley, we're just like one or two cycles or generations in terms of these serial entrepreneurs that are building, their next business and going for something even bigger. I think we were talking the last time we met about Elon Musk, and SpaceX, Tesla, it's really his, what is it, his third or fourth business that he's building, and he's building on the success of his previous startups. And so in Montreal feels like we're one or two startups in for a lot of entrepreneurs on their journey to really building category changing companies. And so, I'm very optimistic about the future of Canada's tech and startup ecosystem. But, it's still a lot of work to get to be done.
Yeah, like you said, it takes it's the 10-year overnight success. So it's like it takes a while for startups to have success, and I think we're starting to see these companies beyond just the classic brand names, but a lot of other ones that are, you mentioned, Vention, right? It's a really up and coming a tech company here that's gaining a lot of traction. Maybe then a question of personal motivation. You mentioned this, having wanting to make a bigger impact with mission, tying it in. So, if you put on your investor hat today, how big do you see the opportunity for mission? In essence, like you said, it's global. Is there even a way of quantifying, let's say, the addressable market, or is it just so big right now that, and it's early days, that it's not even the right frame to use?
Yeah, it's a good question. A lot of times when you ask people about, what are the top tech startups that you know, people refer to Uber, Airbnb, etc. One of the reasons is, marketplaces are disruptive in a good way in terms of the way we live and work. And so they're not easy to build, they're not easy to get started. As we alluded to, it kind of sometimes feels like you're building two businesses, but they have the possibility of really disrupting categories. And so, personally, I'm obviously biased, and I wouldn't be working on mission day in, day out if I wasn't excited about the potential of mission. So it's hard to quantify. I think we looked at a stat where I think currently today, between the US and Europe, there's about 1.5 trillion spent on software development. And that's where it's at today. It's one of these categories that's growing quickly as well, and so it's a massive opportunity from that perspective. I think I saw another stat that said, I think one of the partners from Index, wrote a blog post, and he was saying that only 5% of B2B transactions happen online. 95% of business happens offline. And so there's a massive opportunity for that spend to move online through marketplaces like Mission and other marketplaces. We don't believe this is a winner take all. I think that's something that may have been more unique to the consumer space. I didn't really think that through, but I think there's something about it being different in the B2B space in terms of the size and the specific needs of different industries and different countries that will make it so it's not a winner take all. But it's still a massive opportunity just based off of the size of it.
Yeah, so even simple ideas, things like benefits, right? When you get a certain scale, you'll be able to offer things like benefits to the missionaries, right? If you have a name for the developers, but that work on the platform.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely exciting. We can envision a whole marketplace being built on top of the marketplace in terms of providers offering services that help you live and work in this type of future of work that we're building. Um, I'm thinking of Morrow from Boundless, for example. I had a great conversation with him about a month ago. He's building an amazing startup. There's a lot of synergies in terms of the the way or the offer that he's building for people to be able to work and live and provide education for their children in other parts of the world, and really live this like digital nomad remote work life. And so that infrastructure is just starting to get built. It's going to be pretty exciting to see in the future how it all kind of comes together.
Gabriel, I could probably bug you for a few hours. Every time we talk, I feel so inspired with pulling ideas and so many notes. But respectful of your time. Final question is: if people want to reach out, learn more about Mission, what's the best way?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Feel the same. Definitely appreciate the conversation. The time flew by quickly. It feels like we can probably talk for another hour. If you want to find out more about Mission, check out mission.dev is the website. You can follow us on LinkedIn. You can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm trying to post some interesting content about kind of future of work, and I really appreciate the podcast that you put together. It's great. I think we talked about it. Pre-COVID, I was teaching a class in university in entrepreneurship. And one of the other things I was doing was working on a tech blog with Ian Jeffrey, the CEO of Breathe Life. And we often talked about Ian and and I talk to my class about how important it is to tell the stories about what's happening in Montreal and in Canada, for like a younger generation of entrepreneurs to hear those stories, because it's really interesting. And I love listening to your podcast. It's great to hear, in-depth conversation with entrepreneurs that sound exactly the same as the conversations you hear when you're listening to podcasts from San Francisco or from wherever else in the world. But just hearing locals kind of doing it is exciting and inspiring, and really, I think, changes people's perception in terms of what's possible. You mentioned this event I was at in Toronto.
So, Gab, I'm going to stop you, man, because stop you. It seems that you're offline, so I don't know if you need to refresh, but it's been just the last like maybe 20 seconds. It says you're offline, so I don't think it's recording. I would say I'm going to pause. Hold on.
Okay. Yeah, I was saying, you mentioned this trip I was on a couple of weeks ago in Toronto, for the top growing companies in Canada. And it was interesting. People kept referencing Shopify, as an example. And I think having those examples are important for a country, for a community, in terms of changing the mindset of what's possible. I think once, there's a lot of examples. I can't remember the specifics in terms of like the time record for breaking like a mile in terms of speed. You probably know it better than me. I think once one person broke it, like 10 other people broke it that same year. And so really just having examples of people doing great things, inspirational things, helps change a mindset and helps changes a community and can change a country. So it's great to have these examples, and I appreciate all of that. To say I appreciate the podcast, and the work that you're doing. I know you do it from the right place.
Yeah, thanks for the kind words, Gabriel. And it's been a pleasure. It's been a few years now of doing it, and I find it's easy when you have people that are inspiring, that have that are able to provide, like you said, these great stories. That we're able to document. So for me, it's been such a blast learning selfishly and being able to put out a small platform out there. And I think you mentioned, read the story of the classic story of Roger Bannister, Oxford, 1953. So, scientists were saying you can never beat the 4 minute mile. That's impossible, until one day this person does it, 3 minutes 58. And in the next 2 years, 16 other people do it. Right. So proving that what you thought one day was impossible is possible. I think you're proving it again with Mission. You did it a few times in your career. So I think best of luck with what you guys are doing.
Thanks, Nectar. Appreciate it.
Likewise.